All right, everyone, welcome back to our interview with Jared, Gwen, and Madison Lusk. We're talking about what it's like to be the model Mormon family in Farmington, New Mexico, to do all the things right, temple marriage, 6 kids, eventually being called as bishop. And we just spent 2 good hours talking about their lives as Orthodox Mormons, their service as bishop. We talked a lot about what it's like to be a Mormon bishop and the good and the bad of Mormon culture around bishops and bishopric and leadership and external authority versus internal authority. And up until 2013, the Lusk family was really living the Mormon dream. Not perfect, but happy and serving. And you guys served for over 2 decades in the same ward, which is amazing. So what was it like to be released for both of you?
Well, for me, when it was sad. I'll be honest with you, it was sad. It was happy at the same time because I had that weight lifted off of me and I knew I was going to have all kinds of free time, but it was sad.
Now that's weird. You didn't want the calling. Right. So why were you sad to give it up?
Well, it was just, I think you get used to it and the love and appreciation that you have for all of the members, it deepens and, you know, they have a respect for you and you have a love for them. And it's just,
is it part of that status or part of it is you love serving or just a human connection?
I think for me, it's just a human connection. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a service kind of guy, so I'm not going to say I love service. I'm just being honest. And it definitely is not a status thing for me at all. Definitely not.
Okay. So it's just the people. You like the emotional intimacy, basically. Is that right?
I think so.
And the youth and all that. So you were sad.
Yeah. I was sad, but at the same time, I was relieved and happy, if that makes sense.
Okay. What was it like for you?
Yeah, same kind of emotions. It was just like reflecting back on those 5 years. And I don't know. Yeah, I think we just felt so much love from our ward that they had really loved us and supported us through all of that. And it was emotional. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So by this time it's 2013. The essays are starting to come out.
We don't know anything.
But you don't know anything about that yet.
Not yet. As soon as we got released from Bishop, the state called us to be in charge of a 5-stake trek.
So we were the trail boss.
So we were in charge of
Ma and Pa. That's more than Ma and Pa.
So we were the coordinators of the entire trek. So we had 600 youth and like 120 like adult leaders that we had to organize all of that.
Was it one trek or multiple treks?
It was one trek.
One trek.
With all those
How long did you prepare for that?
About a year and a half.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
Tell our non-Mormon listeners what trek is and what goes into preparing it.
Okay, so it's a throwback to Mormon pioneers and particularly the handcart companies where they tried to save money and they didn't have enough money for horse and wagons or oxen and wagons, and so they just built these little carts that they pulled themselves. And so we have our
across the plains, right?
Across the plains,
from Iowa to Utah, basically.
Yeah, to Utah. And so we reenact that, and we do it in our local area, and we dress up in pioneer clothes, and we build the hand carts. I mean, they're already built, like that's not part of the trek, and we just they put all their stuff in buckets, and they throw it in the back of the hand cart, and they just trek it out and spend, 4 days? It's 4 days.
4 days sleeping in tents?
Not tents. It's like you build shelters, like with the tarps and stuff. Yeah, because you can't carry that much gear. So.
And you're carrying your food and your water and
in a 5-gallon bucket.
Yep.
So you need to tell them about the experience with our trek and
really
it
quick.
Was different.
Why would the church? What are the positive? From the church's perspective, from the members' perspective, why would they do Trek and what's awesome about it? What's the idea behind doing it?
Okay, so I actually loved Trek, and maybe I'm super weird, I don't know. But I love my pioneer ancestors. Like, I feel a connection to them, and I think that that's part of what Trek is to do, is to help you feel connected to your ancestors and everything that they sacrificed so that you could have the gospel in your life today.
Yeah.
And so...
I agree with that, but I also think that the church likes to do these things, these super activities, because it makes an impression on the youth and it can kind of have a lifelong lasting impression on the youth.
For sure.
To make them think that this is the true church and then they're dedicated. And
yeah, if you go through 4 days of bonding with youth, bonding with adults, starving, getting exhausted, physical exertion, even sometimes danger, but then you get through it, you do a really hard thing, and you all bear your testimony. And it can be a memory that lasts your whole life.
Oh, for sure.
When do you ever get something like that? Ever?
You were on that trek, weren't you, Madison?
Yeah, Madison went on that trek.
And we're going to ask you about it. But I mean, just like the positive feelings can be so overwhelming. And then if the church can get you to interpret those positive feelings as the Holy Ghost bearing witness that the church is true,
right,
they can lock you in.
Yep.
Right?
For sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's how it works.
So what was it like preparing and doing a year and a half worth of work?
Yeah, so we had it so worked out, and we had to get all these different committees with the food, and just it was tremendous. We had a couple from every stake, so all 5 of the stakes, and then us that we worked closely with, and to organize this, and we had it all mapped out to every last minute of every day, and it was completely planned. And then we show up and it is pouring buckets of rain, and
it has been for a week.
Has been pouring buckets of rain.
Now,
and
where's Heavenly Father? Or maybe Heavenly Father's giving you a challenge. Which is it?
Yeah, which is it? And there is no way we can proceed with the trek as planned.
Right.
There's no way. There's no way we can do it.
Oh.
So we're scrambling. We have 600 kids, 120 other people. They're looking at us and
saying, 720 people are supposed to be on track.
What are you going to do? We're sitting in mud puddles. What are we going to do?
So the day everyone shows up.
Yeah, it's pouring.
You were hoping the Lord would stop the rain in time, or
yes.
Okay.
And it was impossible to get things where they needed to be because it was in the mountains and it was impossible.
I've never heard this version of track. So
no, this is completely unique of track.
Yeah. So what happened? What'd you do?
So this is what we did, and this is we were like, okay, we can't get to where the base camp is set up. It was impossible. There was no way we could get there.
Because of mud, because of safety.
Yes. All of those things. And so Jared and I took a hike up this little hill, and we were like, hey, what are we going to do? And we just decided that we would hold trek right where we were at. And so we just said, what orange company will be here, and green and red, and we just had to fly by the seat of our pants. And
so like stationary trek, basically?
Yes. And then the rain cleared, and so we had the kids grab the hand carts, and Jared trekked them out. I don't know how many miles.
I knew the country pretty good because those areas where I'd hunted and things, and so we still had a long trek of about 10, 12, 15 miles, I don't remember.
But
it was in the mud and the rain and everything.
And they didn't have any of their gear. But, the tender mercy was that it didn't rain while we were actually trekking.
Of course.
So the rain cleared for 6 hours or something? And they trekked through the dark, and, so they ended up doing a lot of trekking. But then the rain came back, and it rained and rained and rained, and it was unsafe for the kids. And everybody was huddled under these tarps, and
it was dangerous.
The moral feeling of it all, like the morale, that's the word I'm looking for, was going down.
Keep the mic with you even when you turn, just so that it doesn't go in and out.
Okay.
But keep going.
Yeah, the morale was going because we weren't able to do anything. We were hiding out from the rain under tarps, and there were trees that were falling because it was so saturated. So we planned a rescue.
A rescue?
Yeah, we had to be rescued. So you guys are being
super creative here, like on the spot.
Yeah, and that was actually a beautiful thing that there was like hundreds of cars lined up to come pick up these muddy, muddy, muddy kids in their cars and take them to safety.
Oh, a real rescue.
Yeah, it was a real rescue. We had to leave. We had to leave. It was unsafe.
Wow. Are you getting emotional?
Yeah, I don't know why. Just because I'm getting old, I guess.
No. Talk about what you're feeling and what you're thinking.
It just brings back those feelings of, I don't know. It was, to me at that time, it was a spiritual experience. To have all of these kids and all these people, and they were relying on us to figure this out. It was a mess. It was a huge mess.
Yeah, and it was all on. Well, and the thing of it is that we didn't have any sleep the night before because it was the one day it was muddy, and then we took them on this long trek, and then we came back, and it rained and rained and rained, and we slept in the back of our truck, and it filled up with water. Anyway, it was awful, so we didn't have any sleep, and I took a little nap because I was exhausted, and he stayed up just worried.
Yeah, and so I just thought we have to get out of here. It's not safe, and so we got the other leaders together and we told them we need to figure out how to get everybody out of here. And I guess the part that makes me emotional, like I'm old, I guess, is that just to see all of those good people come and get everybody.
It was really a beautiful sight to just look up this dirt road that's so filthy muddy, and everybody around us is so filthy muddy. Like, you have no idea how, like, we're talking mud up to our knees, and we're wearing these long dresses. It was disgusting. And
so we took everybody to this. He's now the stake president of the Durango stake. We took him. He had a really nice big place, and we took him down to his place, and we got in these barns, and we just spent the next day at his ranch that was there. And so we finished the trek early, but it ended up being a really good experience.
It was beautiful, and it was just all about the rescue, and it was, yeah.
It was a completely different trek. I've been on several treks throughout my years because of the callings that I was in and stuff, but it was an amazing experience.
So a couple things just pop out at me. Number one is I wasn't sure which way this was going to go, because it could have gone, like you said, which was all this adversity made us all feel like it was a miracle, and all these hard memories end up being really rewarding because you do something hard together and everyone, something so works out in the end, and so much love. Or it could have gone like, we prayed, and we did all this work, and why did God send rain, and why didn't he fix it? But I was kind of almost rooting for the former, because, and isn't that weird that you can have, like, number one, that it can be so much adversity, but that adversity actually made it more special.
Yes.
And then what a wonderful thing to have experienced, and you're crying about it. Like, that's what's so perplexing about this faith crisis thing.
And our stake is
right?
Our stake is on trek today. Like, they left this week. They're doing it right now. So,
but like, what a crazy thing this Mormonism is, because some of the best memories you'll ever have in your life were in this Mormon bubble.
For sure.
Exactly.
For sure.
And to go back to what you're saying right there, and part of obviously all of the preparation that we did and everything, we prayed a lot. Okay, but when we got stuck in that situation, and this is going to seem weird to people, when we were there on that mountain and it was pouring rain and we had to figure out what we were doing, we never said a prayer.
The two of us, when we were trying,
you knew that then you knew nothing was going to come.
And
I think we were just so stressed out, like prayer didn't even cross our minds. Maybe people are going, oh, that's why they had their faith crisis.
If you would have prayed, the rain would have stopped. It would have dried up. No,
but we did pray with the company commanders, and there was a lot of prayer going on. But when we made those initial decisions, we just used the brains in our heads.
Yeah. Madison, were you at that trek?
Yeah.
Tell us your memories.
It was kind of the same as them. It was amazing to see just all those cars lined up. We're like, what are all those cars here for? And then we just realized, oh, they're here for us. And they're here to, like, help us get to the barn or whatever. And, yeah, it was definitely a different experience.
What about all the cold and rain before and all the changes of plans? What was that like as a kid?
A lot of my, like, Trek siblings, as we call it, were kind of annoyed with it, I guess. I mean, I tried to stay supportive because it was, like, my parents in charge of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was definitely different because we were hiking through mud the whole time, and it was cold. And I remember getting back from, like, the first trek that they were talking about, like, the long one, and we got to, like, eat this really good soup and crackers, and it tasted so good. And then we had it again in the morning, and it was not as good. And it was actually her sister was like, oh, you get one cracker. And we're like, oh, haha, like, go to grab a handful. And she's like, no, really, you can have one cracker. That's it. We're like, okay, why even give us the crackers? So, like, from that perspective, yeah, like, as kids, we were definitely kind of grumpy about it, I guess. But overall, it was a good experience, and it was, like, spiritual, I guess, to see all those people here for us. And
Yeah, talk about how it feels spiritual, how, as a kid, that becomes an important spiritual event for you. Or did it?
yeah, well, like, how my mom was talking with the pioneers, like, what they did for us, and that's the reason that we have the gospel in our lives today. And I was told you can be your own pioneer of, like, modern day and just be a good Mormon and keep the gospel in your family line. Like she said, one line is 8 generations. I'm a 9th generation Mormon. And I didn't want to be the person to screw that up. Like, I wanted to do what I could for my, like, future family and be a good Mormon because of it. And yeah.
So having a physical activity multi-day that really ties you and connects you emotionally back to your 9 generation line of Mormons really kind of locks you in a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And what about just the, testimony meeting, kind of spiritual experiences, connections with the youth and the leaders? I mean, just for me, youth conference, temple trip, dance festival, road show, missionary weekends, any of those stake activities or regional activities, youth conference, where there were deep youth emotions and fun, but also spirituality, just locked, and still to this day are some of my best memories ever. Mm-hmm. Was that the way it was for you?
Yeah. Trek definitely was. And I went to EFY one year, and that was definitely a huge experience for me.
Why?
I just remember one day specifically, we were just sitting in a circle with our company or whatever you call it. I don't even remember.
The groups, little EFY groups.
Yeah, and I just they showed us a video about the Savior and, like, his atoning sacrifice. And then the group leader told, like, this analogy of how we're just all God's children, and he sent us off to school, and he wants to see us come back, and he wants to see us grow. And I just, like, felt this overwhelming feeling of what Christ did for me, and that I want to see Heavenly Father again, and that was my main goal. And I could just feel God's love in my heart, I guess. And from then on, I just wanted to see God again and do what I had to do that.
And as we talk about the bite model and kind of like high demand religions or cults and the that emotion part, that's what we're talking about here is, the negative is the shame and the fear and the guilt, porn, masturbation, modesty. But the positive emotion are these phenomenal activities that you never forget, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was important to you. That's why we have EFY. That's why we do Trek. That's why we have, because it locks people in emotionally with all these positive emotions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to say about Trek?
No, I think they covered it good.
One more thing is, like, what a beautiful, from the church's formula perspective, what a great thing it is to have the mud and the storms, because the psychology, I imagine, isn't, oh my gosh, what a disaster, this is terrible. It's like, yes, adversity, that's what the pioneer experience was. So we get to all rally around and do something super hard. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's a super good point, and that's true. But I think that they do that at the expense sometimes of safety and things, because
and there have been people get hurt.
Yeah,
tracks,
I mean,
right?
what if it didn't turn out like that, and it could have very well,
like a wagon slides down the mud,
or
and
a
runs
tree
over
fall
a kid,
over somebody,
or a tree fall.
I mean,
lightning strikes, or someone gets a cold or a flu. Right? It can go bad. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like on your mission, you fall off a house, right? Like,
yeah, and I don't blame the church for that, but it's true.
Yeah. I mean, so sometimes Trek. Well, so I guess what are the potential criticisms of activities like Trek or EFY? Sometimes youth or adults' safety can be endangered.
I think it's a little bit of a risk. I wouldn't say it's a risk enough to not do them and things like that, because I think everything we do in life has a risk. And whether we're river rafting or whatever we do, I think that those are all good, fun experiences, and I think we need to do it. But I think sometimes that, I don't know, I think they try to make things as safe as possible.
Mm-hmm, I think so.
Carrie writes, a member died on Trek a couple years ago. So sad. I mean, obviously it's going to happen. Kids are going to get injured. Let's see. I would just say that also, let's see. Lisa writes, husband couldn't walk the next morning after the hike. He hurt his knee. I climbed up that awful hill with 2 bowls of soup. I cried all the way up. Is Lisa Black? Is that?
Yes, they were mom.
So Lisa and Alan Black were.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Lisa and Alan didn't have the best experience. Let's see. Heber writes, the first time I ever heard about Jared and Gwen was this trek. There were so many testimonies shared in all the wards of the miracles that happened.
It was amazing. And like people, like it's the trek to be a part of just because it was so authentic with all of the rain and the struggles and the rescue, Like people like to remember the Willie and Martin.
Yeah. Of people dying, right?
Yeah, people dying. And most of the handcart companies made it safely across, but we like to reflect on the Willie and Martin. We like Mormons, we like our adversity, right?
We dig it. We love it. We thrive in adversity. This is becoming its own Trek episode. We'll have to name this episode the episode about Trek. Brock writes, I went on one of the first treks in Arizona in the 90s. Imagine heat exhaustion.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Right? He said we had to kill our own chickens.
Oh, gosh.
It was traumatic. I'm a vegetarian now. That's what Brock says. Boston writes, it was so beautiful, but created such a martyr syndrome.
That's true.
It's kind of manipulative a little bit, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and everybody's like, oh, and I think what she's saying is all the adversity that the pioneers experienced. Like, oh, aren't we special people? We endured all this adversity. I think that's what she's saying. Let's see. Is there anything else? Sub are saying how Trek feels a little bit emotionally manipulative, a little bit contrived. Yeah, Lisa writes, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, trekking through that mud.
It was tough. Physically, it was difficult, yeah.
And then Allison writes, New Mexico can be pretty fierce. New Mexico rain can be pretty fierce. So, all right, enough. And then Taylor Lusk, who is that?
She's our daughter.
Taylor Lusk says, I wish I could be there with you guys. So shout out to Taylor and all the 4 other Lusk children. Wish you guys could be here. Your family's lovely. Kristen's asking what the bite model is. Check out Stephen Hassan. Just Google it. You'll find it. All right. So enough about Trek. So your epic Trek journey. And that was what year?
Oh, gosh. When was that?
Did that end 2015? Because
so 4 years ago.
Yeah. So
they're on it again
that would have been 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's the year that you found out about the essays. So anything else you want to talk about between being released as bishop and Trek that's important in your story?
I think just in passing is after we got released from that calling, they called us to be in charge of the mission prep for our stake. And so we...
Oh, wait. Let me just say, Heber Hinkie writes, it was this trek that I credit for a huge portion of going down the rabbit hole. While preparing to speak to the youth and studying about the handcart companies, it was like lightning hitting me with parallels to leaders within church today. You had these men with missions to be accomplished. I started seeing it as exactly that, men with mission, as exactly that, men with missions. Just like those church leaders back then, they decided no matter what, they needed to get the saints to Salt Lake. We had leaders in the church today ramrodding their programs no matter the cost on the family. So Heber's basically saying that for him, and was he in a stake presidency at the time?
He left.
Former bishop.
Yeah.
Got into a stake presidency. Mm-hmm. And this Trek experience for him was kind of the beginning of the rabbit hole. So that's a preview to the Hinkie interview that we're going to have as soon as you finish your dang house, Hinkies. Finish your house, Heber, so we can interview you in Boston. Did you guys know that was the impetus to Heber's faith crisis?
A little bit,
yeah.
Okay.
We've had a lot of chats with the Hinkies.
Okay. All right. So from Trek mom, pa, or leader to...
Trail boss. We got to get
for trail boss right. To what calling you said?
We're in charge of the mission prep class for our stake.
Okay. Yes. So how was that?
That was what sent me down the rabbit hole, I guess you could say.
Well, kind of. That and the seminary teacher.
Well, yeah. Well, he was. Yeah. So I don't know how long we were doing that calling until. Anyway, approximately the end of 2015 is when our kid's seminary teacher had just surfacely talked about the essays, and I don't remember exact scenario or what happened.
I think he had one of the kids to read them, like he gave them a specific assignment of reading Heavenly Mother and to discuss it with their families. And so
the essay on Heavenly Mother.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we did that as a family.
Okay.
And then I started looking at the other essays, and the first essay that I read was about the multiple accounts of the first vision. And when I read that, it was like...
So what made you like, oh, there are other essays? How did that... I'm curious. So many members don't know the essays even exist. And you served as bishop, and you still...
I didn't know. I didn't know until this seminary teacher brought it to my kids' attention.
Because the church intentionally didn't tell members or bishops. It was almost like it was a legal defense where they could have a defense against claims that the church was misleading people. So they had to put the essays out there, but they didn't want bishops and members to actually know they were there, because then they'd read them and have a faith crisis. So again,
and they were hard to find. It's not, you couldn't just go on LDS.org and they popped up there. You had to actually look for them.
Intentionally
Look for them.
And we have Stephen Snow, who became church historian, admitting that the church intentionally made these gospel topics essays hard to find, and they didn't advertise them because they didn't want members to know about them, ironically. So you hear about this Mother in Heaven essay. How did it make you want to learn more? Do you remember?
I don't remember, other than the fact that I'm curious, and I like to read, and I like to know the truth, and I like to know facts about things, and so I just wanted to learn, and I wanted to know, and so I looked at them, and the first one I looked at was the first vision, and that did me in right there. I was done.
Okay, wait. So you had never heard that Joseph Smith had told lots of different versions of the first vision?
You know, actually, I had heard it, but I didn't pursue it at all. I mean, so I remember once I saw that, I remember that I had heard that at some point in my life, that there were other accounts, but I had never searched it. I never even thought about it. And so when I read those...
Okay, wait, I want to slow down on this part. And by the way, Jody's asking, can you find them now? I'm going to ask listeners right now who are listening to Facebook Live, go try and find the Gospel Topics Essays. And I'm curious how easy or hard it is. Maybe church history essays. I don't know how a member might, without knowing that they exist, find them. But let's do a little goose chase for those of you who are listening on Facebook Live. Go try and find the Gospel Topics Essays and then report back in the live stream how hard it is in easy it is in June of 2019 to find them.
For one thing, the title of that is kind of a little bit weird to me. You know, Gospel Topics Essays that's not something that anybody is going to come up on their own and think, okay, I need to Google or I need to search for Gospel Topics Essays.
Right. Yeah,
it's just very vague.
And it doesn't sound interesting. Like,
yeah, who wants to read that?
Like, it sounds more like the Bible dictionary or something, like the topics in the back of the Bible, whatever. I don't know.
Right. So the name's kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. What else? Okay. So I want to kind of slow down a little bit on this. So you like find out there's a first vision essay, and so you start reading it. Now, I just want to make the point that they're intentionally crafted to leave information out or to contextualize it in a way to where you won't have a faith crisis when you read it.
It didn't work for me.
Okay, so for you it didn't work. So tell us, so you're starting to read it, you're like, that's an essay about first vision stuff, So talk us through kind of your emotional experience as you're starting to read this essay.
Okay,
so you're going, okay.
I read the essay, and I obviously it was shocking to me, and the two emotions that I remember vividly having, first is that like you say, the language that is in there, and the specific quote where they say in there that historians agree that when a person tells a story to different people and in different circumstances, the details are going to vary on that story.
Now that's true.
I had an issue with that because I agree with that, but most people don't have a story to tell where they see God in Jesus Christ. You know, and in my mind, if I was to see God in Jesus Christ, those details in that story would never change. It would be exactly what I saw, and there would be no ambiguity, and there would be no reason to change any details or any story of that at all. And so I had a super hard time with that. I didn't believe that, and I thought it was very deceptive language when I read it.
And so for those who aren't familiar with this issue or haven't read, or who are just Orthodox Mormons or true believers stumbling on this episode of Mormon Stories, talk about the main discrepancies in the different accounts that Joseph ended up telling that were significant in terms of the discrepancies.
Significant for me were the fact that in one of them, in the 1832, there's one person that appears to him, and then
so the Lord in the 1832 version of the first vision, and there are whole Mormon Stories episodes dedicated to the first vision. You can also go to Bill Reel's podcast or John Larson's or others, Mormon Expression. But in the 1832 version, the first written account of Joseph Smith's account of the first vision, the Lord appears to him, not the Father and the Son as distinct beings. He just says the Lord appeared.
Exactly.
And that for
and
you.
So that
what were you thinking?
I was thinking this is not right. And the reason that it affected me so much is because, like I told you very early on, is that the whole strength and basis of my testimony of the church and my belief that it was God's only one true church on earth was based completely 100%.
Yeah, you said at the beginning it was all Joseph Smith, right?
It was 100% on Joseph Smith and the first vision. And as I grew up, all my entire life, I can't tell you how many times I've seen the videos that the church puts out of Joseph Smith going to the grove and praying and seeing God and Jesus. And I taught that, and I recited that on my mission millions of times. And so that was the scene that I had in my head. And that when I read those essays, that is not what the scene that I was brought up to believe and to see my whole entire life.
Because we watched that film, we grew up on that movie or that film strip of Joseph Smith's first vision, and it's very clear Joseph Smith looking up in the grove of trees and the two personages coming down. And
so the two emotions that I had were, first, that Joseph Smith is not telling the truth about this and that this really didn't happen, and two, that the church is being intentionally deceptive with me, and they have lied to me and deceived me my whole entire life. And it made me angry. And so I was done immediately at that time.
Okay, really quickly.
And when I say done, I mean that I didn't believe that the church was true.
Right. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons to me. One is we could look at the church coming out with the essays as a really good thing. It's like, oh my gosh, they're coming clean. They're being honest, right? And they're coming clean about their history. And the only reason you're learning about it is because the church told you. So like that could be interpreted as a really good thing, right? Like the church is doing the noble, the honorable, the honest and courageous thing.
Now here's the part where I could get angry and show sometimes my anger that I have on this whole situation, but that's an argument. But in my mind, the only reason they're doing it and the only reason they've come out with this is to cover their behinds and to not look as bad. And I think they have no choice but to do it. They didn't do it on their own free will of goodwill.
Yeah, because really, for decades they excommunicated anyone who talked openly about this, hid it from members. And by the way, even when they were making the Joseph Smith First Vision movie, they knew there were multiple accounts because the Joseph Fielding Smith knew this back in the 50s and 60s, and hid when he found the diary account of Joseph Smith's first account, he literally rips it out of the journal and hides it until the Tanners come around in the 60s, find out that he had done this, or ripped out the first version of the First Vision out of a journal, and shame him into putting it back and taping it back into the journal that he'd ripped it out of. And it was basically, Mormon, dialogue, and then Sunstone and the Mormon History Association, and then years of podcasts and the CES letter, Mormon Stories and others that just kept beating the church over the head from 2005 to 2013, calling the church deceptive and lying and misleading and fraudulent, that forced, like you said, the church to make these changes. But anyway, but the other thing is, they're causing your faith crisis. How weird is that you're a former bishop and the church is causing your faith crisis by releasing this information?
Yeah, if that
That's
wouldn't have
kinda
been
weird.
there, our faith crisis would have never happened.
You'd probably still be members.
Probably.
Yes.
Like, so was it smart or dumb for them to come out with the Gospel Topics Essays?
I think it was dumb, but I'm grateful that they did.
Well, and then another interesting point is that he's being a faithful member. He's taking his personal scripture study serious, and he's trying to learn as much as he can about the gospel, and so to me that shows.
Yeah, I didn't read the Gospel Topics Essays with the idea that this was going to cause me to leave the church.
Why did you read them? Why didn't you just say, I know it's true, I don't need to read the essays?
I honestly had no idea that the essays had this negative material in it.
Yeah, we didn't know they were controversial at all. We thought it was just more church material just to study.
Yeah, and that's what's just so ironic, is that the church, you're being excommunicated in 2000, and we'll get back to this, but you are being excommunicated in 2019 for a problem the church started. Like, they hid the information from you, but then they published the essay, then you read it, and now you're having a faith crisis, and now you're being blamed for the crisis they started.
Exactly.
And we'll get back to that. Okay, so you're reading this essay. You've served for now 50 years or however many years, given your life to the church, and all of a sudden in one essay, tell us emotionally, well, it's not just I didn't believe anymore. Tell us emotionally what you're experiencing in late 2015 as your world starts to crumble. How could it happen that fast?
I don't know how it could happen that fast. Let me backtrack and just go over one conversation that Gwen and I had one time, because this kind of contributes to the anxiety and the emotional difficulty that I had once I found this out. And I hate to say things like this because it might sound like I'm trying to put myself higher than I really am, and that's not what I'm trying to do. But my stake president, I love him, and he was always telling me, and he was telling Gwen, that he was going to turn my name in to be a mission president. And I didn't want that. That was not what I wanted. And Gwen can testify that he told her that.
Yeah, he told me that.
And so one day I remember telling Gwen, if that actually happens, I'll say no. And just in joking, she said.
And you meant it though?
I did.
You didn't want to go on a mission, serve a mission.
I didn't want
as
to
a
be mission president.
Why?
No, because that was just way too much for me. No.
Okay.
And I told her that, and she said, well, I'll divorce you then if you did that. She was joking, but
I didn't mean it.
She had never said those words in her whole entire life. And so I didn't believe her, but it still, those words had come out. And so.
The I'll divorce you words.
Yeah.
And I
As
don't
a
even
joke.
know why
No, I know.
said them. I mean, I didn't really truly mean them, but more it was like I thought he was kidding me because that's not who he is. He had never turned down a calling. And so I'm just throwing it back in his face. Well, if you're going to not be you, then I'm going to not be me, and I'll divorce you. So.
But sometimes those things we say in jest can stick in our minds, right?
Right.
And so when I was confused when that happened, and I didn't know what to do. And I was scared because I knew my faith was gone and that I didn't believe in the truth claims of the church. Now, obviously, from that point, I started digging in it, and I'll go into that. But it was hard because I knew it was going to break Gwen's heart, and I knew that was going to be the hardest thing, and I didn't want to do that. I wasn't sad for myself.
You weren't?
No.
You didn't go to like, oh my gosh, I gave 50 years to this.
I was angry because of that, but I wasn't sad. It didn't like break my heart that the church wasn't true so much.
It didn't?
No, it really
The fact
didn't.
that you were giving your whole life to it and
It
based everything on it. And,
like I say, initially I think I was more angry than anything.
okay.
Because I felt deceived and lied to by the church.
Okay.
And that I gave up my whole life for that.
So you
For
did
that.
feel those things because that's super normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that wasn't.
But I
your
wasn't
biggest concern.
I wasn't sad because the church wasn't true. I mean, does that make sense? That
Yeah.
different there? I was sad for what I'd given up, and mostly for how Gwen's reaction was going to be. And I didn't know what that was going to be like. I didn't have doubts that she would stop loving me or leave me or anything like that. I wasn't worried about that, but I didn't know how to handle that.
Okay. Yeah. So what did you do?
I spent 2 years. Obviously from there, the next essay I read was about polygamy. And I didn't know what the word polyandry meant. I'd never heard that word in my life. But when I looked at that and I read that Joseph Smith had married other men's wives, I wasn't okay with that at all. And that he had married somebody that was 14. And there again, I noticed that wording in that essay right off the bat. And where they said that she was just several months shy of her 15th birthday. I felt like that was intentionally deceptive. And I was angry about that, because why? I mean, it's one thing to put out these essays, but why do you have to put them out and make the wording in such a way that, kind of hides the truth a little bit? And so I wasn't okay. So I just went on a crusade, and I just started reading and listening to podcasts, and just it was addicting. I couldn't get away from it.
How did you discover that podcasts existed? Because the essays don't refer to the podcast.
No. And honestly, I don't know how. The first thing, once I had read those 2 essays of the first vision and polygamy, I just went to the internet and I Googled. I already knew Joseph Smith was not a prophet, but for some reason I Googled, was Joseph Smith really a prophet? And that took me, what I went to from there was Mormon Think, and I just read everything on there.
Great website, Mormon Think.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And then I went to, now my mind just went blank.
CES letter?
Fair Mormon.
Okay.
I read everything from Fair Mormon, and I wasn't okay with the things.
Talk about Fair Mormon, why it did or didn't.
Because they admitted everything that I was having a problem with.
Right.
And then they just tried to put a good spin on it. And
so the reason why the church needs to stop supporting Fair, honestly, if they care about doing good in the world, is it's not effective. It validates all the problems from an external third-party source, and then it gives really lame answers. And those lame answers were what for you?
I don't remember specifically the lame answers. I just know that my problems were that, did Joseph Smith really have multiple accounts of the first vision? And they verified that. Was Joseph Smith really marrying other men's wives? And they verified that. I don't care what the answers are or what the reasons are. It's facts and it's true. And so I don't care what spin anybody can give on it. It's out there. And so from there, somehow I got put onto Mormon Stories. I don't know where it came, but I started listening to podcasts, and it was just fascinating to me. And I would read a few books, like I read Rough Stone Rolling and different pieces of different books and things, and just to more educate myself of more of the history that was going on and all of the details behind everything. And everything that is on the first vision is on the essay is so superficial, and there's so much more details and so much more information out there involved to just solidify, that really didn't happen.
Okay. Why were podcasts useful or helpful to you during this free fall?
For me, because it just made me aware that there was other people going through the same thing, and they were having the same experiences that I was having, and I wasn't alone.
What did that make you feel? Not alone? Mm-hmm. What else? Anything else?
It made me feel validated that I'm not crazy, and that really there are these issues out there. And
were there any podcast episodes, and not just to Mormon Stories, but any podcast episodes that were particularly useful or meaningful to you during this time?
The first ones that were really helpful to me that I listened to were, I wrote them down because I'm so terrible with names.
You can consult
the McClays.
Yeah, Brooke and John McClay.
Brooke and John McClay from Colorado Springs.
Former CES director himself.
Yes.
That was a classic. Mm-hmm. That's a classic.
Kim Sanders.
Kim Sandberg Turner.
Sandberg Turner,
Waka and her own journey.
Hers was amazing. And Tom Phillips. And Tom Christofferson.
Oh, wow. What was important about that?
One of the first things that I became acutely aware of when I left immediately was the LGBTQ stand. I had no, obviously I was raised in the church and I had these biases toward there, and I didn't understand it, but those completely changed my life and my feelings towards those issues, and gave me a love for those people and acceptance of those people that I'd never had.
The Tom Christofferson interview.
Yeah, and Kim Sandberg
Turner.
Yeah,
she talked about having an LGBT child. Yeah,
and so those issues really brought to my attention how harmful the church is and how judgmental we all are towards those people who are just like we are. I mean, they're no different. And so it was super enlightening and awakening to me, and I just liked them. And then obviously all of the Truth Claims podcasts and just people's stories, and they were all so similar, falling on the Gospel Topics Essays and finding this information and losing their testimonies, and it was just comforting.
Okay.
And so I would go through this and spend hours and hours on these things, and I would say little things to Gwen and to my family, and they were starting to see things that weren't okay with them. And
okay, so how many months did you study without telling Gwen that you were going down the rabbit hole?
I think it was pretty soon after the first vision thing that I started talking about the first vision, but it didn't affect them. You know, I have kids that were returned missionaries, and I talked to them a little bit about it, and it didn't bother them. It didn't bother them that there was multiple accounts. And I didn't understand that. I couldn't grasp it, and I still can't understand that, how the first vision is the basis foundation of our religion. If that didn't happen, everything else is a fraud. And Gordon B. Hinckley said that, you know? And so I still don't to this day understand how when there's variation in those stories, and how if that's not true, that you can ignore that.
Right. Yeah.
And then I just started dropping little bits and pieces from time to time. Gwen and I would go on walks and hikes all the time, and sitting in the hot tub at night, and Gwen can talk about this and say some of the things that I would bring up. And
well, I just want to say one last thing for this part is it's got to be incredibly hard. You're 49, 50 years old. You've been a bishop for 5 years. You know, in Mormonism, for better or for worse, in a patriarchy, you're viewed as the spiritual leader and the spiritual authority in the home. Mm-hmm. And this comes from my dear friend Jarrett, who was a bishop when he lost his faith, and what it was like to tell his family he had lost his faith. It is a major significant thing to sort of like contemplate falling from grace in their eyes, right?
Yeah, and not only that,
losing status.
Exactly that. Not only that, but also the members of your ward who you've been with for 24 years. I dreaded that. That was one of the hardest things to know that I was going to have to come out at some point and disappoint all of these people, and that was hard.
Yeah,